Afreilach and Chanukah, this is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Tes Vav, and as we move into the month of Teves, all the learning on this month has been generously sponsored as an incredible Schos Aliyas Neshama for Rav Aryeh and Rav Ya'akov, whose yahrzeit is on today's Daf Aleph Teves B'siyata Dishmai, the learning of the entire Chabura Talmud Torah K'negei Kulam Torah B'Rabim should bring Aryeh and Yaakov to higher place in Gan Eden Shalmayla, closer to the Kisei HaKavod, and ultimately be a Melatz Yosher for his entire family and for the entire Chabura. As well, we'd like to dedicate today's share as a chosr for Shlema for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva. So we're on Yudalim Beis, we're about 8 lines from the wide lines, in which we quote the Mishnah, which taught us that the Rabbi Meiser Sheni Sheinami Yaduin, Net Ravai, which is after 3 years of Arlo, the 4th year, the produce has been eaten in Eretz Yisrael. Yushalayim or redeemed and eaten there, Meiser Sheni as well. She'endam Yadum, that the value is not known. Bishleisha, it needs to be appraised, has to be evaluated by 3 people. Tanarabanan says the Gemara, Meiser Sheni She'endam Yadum. What does that mean? That you don't know the value? Says the Gemara, we're talking about a case of Meiser Sheni that's not a normal valued item. Which is what? Peirosher kivu, rotten fruits, v'ayin shehikrim, a wine that is sour to mois, shechlidu, or rusty money. These are all entities that don't really have a value, and therefore the Mishnah is teaching us that have to be appraised by 3 dayan. Tanarabanan says the Gemara, Meiser Sheni Shein Davi Yaduin, Paidin Azabish Laisha Lekuchais. Should be appraised, it should be evaluated by Shleish Lekuchais, 3 merchants. Avalei b'Shleish Shein Lekuchais. Afilu Nachri Echan Me'an. Excuse me, on the last narrow line. Afilu Nachri Echan Me'an. Even one guy is allowed to be involved. Afilu Echan Me'an Bailim, and even one of the people is allowed to be the owners. But as long as there's 3 of them creating the value of and appraising this item, that will work. So by Rav Yirmi on the first white line, Shleisha Matilon Kis Echan Ma'u. Ask Rav Yirmi if we have 3 people in which they pool their earnings, they're all investors with each other, can they be the 3 appraisers on this item? Tashema says the Gemara, Ish Ushtei Nashav Paidin Meiser Sheni, a man Ushtei Nashav and his 2 wives. She'ein Dam, what are you doing? So what do we see? We see that 3 people who are all clearly partners, the man and these 2 women that he's married to, are allowed to act as those who appraise. Says the Gemara, Dilma Kion Rapapa Bas Abba Visuria, says the Gemara, no. Maybe we're talking about a case in which the wife does not share her earnings with her husband. She keeps them to herself, like Rav Papa and his wife, who was the daughter of Abba Surya, who their earnings were now pooled, and therefore we do not necessarily have a raya. Continue on the third wide line, Hektish is Bishleisha. Hektish is evaluated by 3. Masis like Tanya, says the Gemara, the Mishnah like the following Tanya. The Tanya. Rav Lazvin Yaakov Aimer, Afilu Sinur Shalaktish Vichasa, Rav Ne'adal Fadaisa. Says Rav Lazvin Yaakov, even a tzinura, even a mere spinning fork that belongs to the hektish requires 10 people. Clearly not like a Mishnah. Amalei Rapapa Labai says Rapapa, Bishal Rav Lazvin Yaakov Damar Kishmol, I understand. He's saying like Shmuel, that's why you need 10. What Shmuel? Damar Shmuel. 5 lines in the bottom. Asara Kayanim Ksuvim B'Parsha. 5 Kayanim are written in the Parsha. And therefore, not 5. Asara Kayanim Emra Parsha. El Rabbana and Shleisha and Alu, where the Rabbana know this be 3. If you're going to tell me Techsebu Shleisha Karkais. And if you're going to say Techsebu Shleisha, it says, it refers to 3. I don't understand. If the word, if you're going to go by the times that the word is listed, then by karka it's listed 4 times. Maybe karka requires 4 dayanim. So we learned hakarkais tishavekain. Elamai de mishalmebu asara ekteisha esara ekteisha shambu shita libai shita. Says the Gemara, Elamai, what are you going to have to answer me? You're going to have to answer me the Shambu Basara. It means that the 4 extra mentions of the word Kayin and the Pasuk brings it up to 10. But the problem is, if you're going by such, then like Teishais, Timshabu Shita Libai Shita. The word Kayin is mentioned 3 times, so you should have to add on 3 to the normal 3 Dayanim, and you should require 6. So says the Gemara Kasha, we don't have a Makar, this is Shver, as the numbers don't seem to add up. Well, you need 3, you need 6, or you're going to need 10. We continue Arachayin, 2 lines to the bottom. The Erech value of Metaltlin, unmovable objects, is 3 Dayanim. My Erech, it says the Gemara Metaltlin, Rav Gidol Merav, Ba'im Erech Kli Zalai. If someone says the value of this Kli is upon me to give to the Beis HaMikdash. Ta'amar Rav Gidol, as Rav Gidol taught, Ta'amar Rav, as we move over, to Tezvavam and Aleph, says Rav Gidol Merav, Ba'im, if someone says Erech Kli Zalai, Noisein Damav, he is obligated to give the value of that item. My taima. What is the reason that by saying Erech Kli Zalai, that's what he has to give? Everyone knows, isn't that there's no set value. What he means to say is I'm giving some level of value. That's why he has to give the value, not the item itself. Ask the Gemara. Hi, Erchen metaltlin. Erchen shall metaltlin mi bailey. Says the Gemara, there's a language issue. Why does the Mishnah say Erech ha-metaltlin? Should have said Erkin shall ha-metaltlin. Answers the Gemara, you got to switch around the wording in the Mishnah to Erchen shall metaltlin teretz number 1. Rav Chisda, Amar Avimi b'matvis metaltlin Erchen. We're talking about a similar case, but slightly different. When one pledges to move specific items le'erchen for his erech value in order to be makdish them, the Mishnah is teaching us that in order to do that, you first have to evaluate it by 3 dayanim. Asks the Gemara similarly, I erchen ha-metalton metalton shel erchen mi ba'alei. Tani metalton shel erchen. Rav Avua Amar comes in Rav Avua, and he explains the third way of learning the Mishnah 10 lines down. Ba'omer erki alai. My value is upon me. If it comes to collect metalton, he needs 3. A karka, you need 10. I understand, in order to negate and say that you're removing something from the hektish, you need 3 people to give an accurate appraisal. Ella, but ask the Gemara, hektish, to put something into hektish, what do you need the 3 dayanim? Amar le, svaru, mali aluy, mali afuki. That's a svara. What's the difference in putting in anything out? Afuki, my time. You still have to worry that someone might make a mistake as the money goes in as well. The Gemara continues by quoting the Mishnah about 15 lines down. Rav Yehuda, Aimer, Shitas Rav Yehuda, you need a kayin amongst the minyan to perform the Shuma evaluation. That's why the pasuk says kayin, the rabbanin kayin lamali. Says the Gemara Kasha, that is shver. Hakarkai is tisha v'kayin. Ask Gemara, from where do we know that karka is not in a kayin? Answers the Gemara, Amar Shmuel. Says Shmuel, Asar kayanim usuvim bevarisha 10 times kayin. Chal legufe. Hanachave miyot achar miyot. To minimize, after minimize, yimina chamiyot elu the rabbis. And what does it come to include? Afilu tisha Yisrael. And ve'echa kayin. Meaning, it's not that you need the majority kayin, you need to have some level of kayin, and that will be enough. Maybe 50-50 should be enough, says the Gemara Kasha, Nachamol. We have to wait for such a teretz. And the Mishnah smack in the middle with the 2 dots, the Mishnah continues that person as well has to be evaluated by 10 people. Adam, says the Gemara, Mikadosh. Can you sanctify, consecrate, be makdish a person? Amaravua b'amar demei alai, my value. Titania oimer demei alai. Shamanai saikevet anim karbashok vevet itkish likarkais. So it's referring to someone who gives his value, and we have to evaluate what he's worth. So by Rav Avin, sharaimi ligzais, say araimi ligzais hair, which is going to be shorn off by kama. Do we say a klal and halach, anything that's going to be cut off, it's as if it's already cut off? And therefore it's regular metal, to therefore it'll suffice with 3. I don't know. I give a chaber dam you basar. You need 10. Tashma maktish avdoi. Ein moilin boy rashvagam or moilin besai. Roy v'kaim alon. How could have the ila? How could he deconsecrate the hair? The besai roy me legs is poligli. Shmamina nema. Shmamina. So we have a raya back to our shayla. And for there it continues the Gemara, Nema Hani Tanai, Kahani Tanai. In the classical sense, as the Gemara, maybe the aforementioned Machlekes already had its basis in Tanai. Titzanan Remeir Aimer, Yishwan Shin Kekarka, Vina Kekarka, Vichamadoi. Ketzad, Eser Gavanim Tunais. Masarti l'chavalam ein elacham. You should only fire meir machayim. Why do mix l'cham come l'cham like karka? Say l'cham. No, it's regular case of karka, and there was no shvua. But maybe Zerachanina anavim oim the libaster asking him about grapes are going to be harvested. Mar savar kibsuras damyon if it's harvested. Mar savar lav kibsuras damyon. So maybe that same machlaikas that we just suggested, whether it's even legs or not, is a previous machlaikas tanoim. Says Gemara loy. That feels him around there. I'd only come around there. Awesome. Ella called Kama de Shavka Leho Michshi Kachish. As long as they're left, they're going to deteriorate on the vine. Avil Sairai. Called Kama de Shavka Leashvui Mishabich. Says the Gemara, you can't equate the two because the hair is not something that's going to harm the animal if it's going to be cut off. Not so much so by the payrois that it's going to rot. Continue 12 lines of the Y lines, moving into the next part of the Mishnah, which is the cases necessitating 23 dayan. The nefashes v'chulu kapasik v'tani says Gemara loishin aroiva zachar loishin aroiva nekeva. Says the Gemara, there's no difference whether the relations between animal and beast or with a man, or whether it was with a male animal and a female. In either way, the case is the animal has to be stoned, and therefore you need 23 dayanim to deal with the case. Says the Gemara again, I understand as a isha. And says the Gemara, how do we know the same din is true by a Roiva Zachar? We don't need it for that pasuk today. Forceful. V'navki rachman of lashon sheichiv lakushe that was nishkav l'sheichiv ma sheichiv hu be'emtei bas v'shleishav nishkav hu be'emtei basois v'shleishav. So whether the human or whether the animal is the one being doing the proactive act, in both cases we need 23 dayanim to care for the case. And the last narrow line on Tezvav and Aleph Sharnizka Brez v'shleishav, an ox which is going to have to be stoned due to the fact that it's a killer axe. You need 23. Shemamina says the Gemara. Just like the Bailam is 23, so to the Shar. On the last line, the Rava Mimai Dahai Gamba Bailam Mimas Kamisas Bailam Kamisas Sharudas. How do we know the pasuk is teaching us the way of Misa? That just like the Bailim receives the type of Misa, therefore the Shar is the same thing. And we turn over to Tezvav Amid Aleph, and says the Gemara, Ella likatala who dasa. No, it's just referring to that there actually is a death penalty to the owner. So how do you know? As the Tabrash says, l'chayim misa l'baylam and l'chayim misa. Ve'ech mafkinu lam mibashet l'Gemara. So where do we know this from? Says Marim Kei lechle v'gam baylam v'lishtek. You should have been quiet. Iksiv rachmana hachi. Says the Gemara, if I would have written this, havamina v'skila, I would have thought Stam, that the owner does get skila. So the pasuk says, in the way it does to teach us that the death penalty to the owner of the animal is not the same as for the animal. The animal requires skila, but the owner will require not skila, but rather strangulation, rather being choked. One more time. Beskila zal gedaydach. Suddenly you would have really thought that the owner gets skila. But if the owner kills someone, if you go and you proactively murder someone, still the halacha is you don't get skila. Memayna beskila. And now you're going to think that if his mama and his property killed, you're going to get skila. Response to Gemara, V'dama Haidikos Rachmana Yumas, like Kuli Aluye, maybe it's going to be Mekel, Lafuki Mesayiv Lachenech, that what? It's lowering it. So the Gemara is doing a full 360. And suggests to Gemara, maybe it's going to lower it, that what? Lafuki Mesayiv, it's not going to get Sayif, and rather it's going to get Chenek, strangulations. Says Gemara 1 second. Which is more chomer. So what are you going to say? Looks like a daitach. Says Gemara, why? Tichsev im koiver yushas olav. These are going to get killed. So it can't be easy to be killed. Says Gemara, wait, Adrabah. Shemi gufa katel. This the reason is that he's going to be killed. It does not mean to pay kaifer, rather that he's being put to death. Ella b'katala. I understand why can he not redeem himself with the mammon. Ella amar chizkiya v'chein tanad v'chizkiya amar kra mois yumas hamakeh. Roitzeachu al ritzichasai only at arga. If at arga al ritzichasharai. By eluciding 1 second. Shar Sinai bikama. As the Gemara and Ox, which went on to Har Sinai, and of course any animal, human being, cannot go to Har Sinai, so it has to be put to death. How many? Mi Gamar Shas Shah Midurais. Says the Gemara, Shah Midairis. Do we learn the Shah, the temporary laws? Temporary laws. Midairis, that will be there forever. And therefore, need same thing as a death penalty. Oilai Tashmat and remember Chazkal and Behima Imish Lo Yechem Aish Bechav Gimel. Af Behim Bechav Gimel, learning that the death penalty is always one that requires 23 dayanim, even by an animal. We continue at the 2 dots. We're almost at the middle of the Amid Hariv Hazev. Omar Reish Lakish says Reish Lakish, what does the Mishnah refer to when these animals kill a person? He's so alive, then you don't have to do anything. Alma Kasavar says the Gemara, Yeshlan Tarbos, Yeshlan Bailin. Must be, says the Gemara, that these animals can be tame and could have an owner, even a stake. Rav Yechlan Arnaf Yishlaim Yisu Alma Kasavar Einlam Tarbos, Einlam Bailin. So we have a machlek. So Tanan, ask Gemara Reish Lakish. Rav Eliezer, Aimer, teach Rav Eliezer, Kolakadil Nahar Gun. Zacha teaches Rav Eliezer that what Kolakadil Nahar was first to kill them is going to make the kidney. So Bishlam Rav Yechlan, my Zachi, Zachi La'ayran. Doesn't make a difference. El Reish Lakish, my Zacha, Kiva Shkivan, Shemisa, Shavin Rabbanan, Kamar de Gamar de Yane, Visura Ananinu, it's Azar Bahana. So my Zacha, Zacha L'Shamayim, could you ever do anything to think, maybe use it? Tani Gemara Reish Lakish says the Gemara, Echad Shar Shehimis, Echad Behema, V'chaya Shehimis, B'chav Gimel, that in all cases of Misa, it's going to be 23 for the animals. Rav Eliezer, Aimer, Shar Shehimis, V'asif V'shloisha, V'shar Behema, no, V'chaya Shehimis, Kol Kodim L'Argan, Zachav, and the Shvaim, so you have a machlokes. At what level is needed to convict other animals?